saw him on TV take the stage and address a crowd of thousands in Chicago. Basically, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but the 2,049 words.
Oh, the gallery is Spence Gallery, and that's my name. Just use that name for the gallery. And so we started in this small location with the mandate of presenting contemporary expressions of Caribbean, Latin, and African culture. And since Toronto is, as you've probably seen since you've been here, quite diverse and very multicultural, my idea was that we'd have a gallery that somehow represents part of that multiculturalism. Because from going to galleries in town, like I noticed, you never see a lot of representation from people from those backgrounds. Most of the artists live here in Toronto or somewhere around Canada, but there are some artists that are, you know, international, like I'm taking their work from their country of origin. So we have artists from South Africa, Cameroon, I've done artists from Tanzania and Kenya, and we have artists here where their backgrounds from Sudan, parts of West Africa, quite a few places in Latin America and the Caribbean. Okay, so this body of work here is by Iseldin Kajor. He's originally from Sudan, currently lives in Canada. He's been here for about maybe 5 or 6 years. And he's a very formally trained painter. Got all his art training in Africa, in parts of Sudan and Kenya. And he's been quite prolific here and been showing in quite a few galleries. And in Toronto, I'm the primary gallery that represents his work. And his work's very, very colorful. I don't know how much you know about Sudan, but it actually is influenced very much by the East and by Africa. There's like a very Muslim culture. And so you can see a lot of that reflected in his work. And he also studied calligraphy, like with Arabic calligraphy. This artist is Oswaldo Cantule, and he is Costa Rican. He's an Aboriginal Costa Rican. So one of the native people of Costa Rica. And I don't know if you're familiar at all with native art, but you see similar symbolisms in what you might see in Canadian native art or Australian native art. Like, for example, the turtle, which shows up, and the canoe, and other types of symbols that are very much part of the culture. And he's, you know, from a coastal place, so water is also quite symbolic, and that shows up along with the mermaids in his water. I mean, in his paintings. And he is actually quite well known and very well respected in Costa Rica, although he's living here. He's married to a Canadian woman, and he goes back to Costa Rica sometimes to do art shows. But yeah, all the artists in this room are of Latin background. Here, Jesus is originally from Mexico. Naum is from Honduras. Ivan's from Argentina, and Marcelo is from Bolivia. So these are all Latin artists currently living in Toronto, and we've been featuring them, most of them at the gallery now for almost 2 to 3 years, doing quite well. And Marcelo is actually quite a known artist in Latin America, and he's gaining more prominence here. There's a book that will be published about him soon. He just finished a museum show in Mexico at one of the public museums there. It would rent from June to November. So he's quite a renowned, you know, sort of mature artist, like really getting up there in terms of being in the public eye. So the gallery represents over 25 artists, and so what you're seeing today is just a sample of some of those works from a few of our artists' images. And often people like you get drawn into the image, like you feel like you have a relationship, or that you feel like you really want to enter that person's life or something. Yeah. And she's really intriguing.
I mean, she's able to capture that.
Yeah. And I should tell you that she is one of our artists that's most popular with Americans. Yeah, the artist is Opal Dunbar Adams, and she paints primarily figures and faces of mostly women and often also children.
Toronto has a very strong Black history, Black heritage here. As you know, there's a longer part to the Black history. Toronto can only provide a snapshot of Black history and Black culture for this city. The Black history does not start in Toronto, it does not end in Toronto. It merely is just truly a snapshot of what is here. But Toronto has a very strong history of anti-slavery legislation, we were very, very fortunate to have one of the first ministers to legislate Black History Month. But the Black history and the culture here is very unique to a lot of places where that we absolutely have folks that come from, I guess, the slave history from the U.S. We have people who come here from an immigration background. Majority of our Black culture here is from the Caribbean, but we do have the Caribbean, the African, and definitely some U.S. influence in our city. So it's kind of a patchwork of histories that take part in our city, and I think people find that intriguing, but yet a little bit confusing on some levels. But we celebrate it and we embrace Black history and Black culture in Toronto. For me to live in Toronto is to live in a city that very much represents the world, it represents the globe. I think we're very fortunate to have interactions with so many different cultures and so many different people from different parts of the world, and you can see that in our art. You can see that in especially our culinary scene. We have over 7,000 restaurants that represent a great chunk or a great portion of the world.
I'm Jon Haggins, the GlobeTrotter. I'm here in Toronto. Toronto is one of those hidden secrets that's really a skip away from home. I love it. The luxury hotels, the sights, the attractions, the great cuisine. It's a fantastic place to visit, and I can't wait to return. Until next week, I'm Jon Haggins. I hope to see you next week at another great destination. Remember, get up, get out, and travel! Hope to see you next week for another cultural experience. So long for now.